Betrayal, I have learned, doesn't always come with shouting or violence. It often arrives quietly, like a shadow crossing your heart. For years I thought sacrifice would earn me love, but I was mistaken. My name is Margaret Walker, and this is my story. A story of family, secrets, and the day I decided to take back everything they stole from me. Before I take you into the heart of my journey, let me ask, where are you watching from? My name is Margaret, and I'm sharing this story because sometimes we need to hear that it's never too late to stand up for ourselves. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a story about finding your voice when no one else will give it to you. Let's begin. Margaret, could you watch Olivia tonight? We have that charity gala. Emily's voice carried through the kitchen doorway, though she hadn't bothered to actually enter the room where I was preparing dinner. Of course, I called back, stirring the sauce that would go untouched again. What time do you need me? 7. And don't let her stay up past 9. She's been getting too comfortable with late bedtimes. I heard her heels clicking against the hardwood as she walked away. No thank you. No acknowledgement that I'd been watching Olivia every weekend for the past 3 months while they attended their endless social events. Grandma Maggie? Olivia appeared in the doorway, her dark hair pulled back in the same ponytail she'd worn since she was 7. At 12, she was growing taller, but still had that quiet way of moving through the house, as if she didn't want to disturb anyone. Yes, sweetheart. Do you want help with dinner? I finished my homework. I smiled, wiping my hands on the kitchen towel. I'd love that. Can you set the table for 5? Your Uncle Brian might join us tonight. Mom said he's not coming. Olivia said, reaching for the plates. She said he's too busy with his new girlfriend to care about family dinners anymore. The sharpness in Emily's judgment of Brian stung, mainly because I knew she'd never say such things about David's absence. From family gatherings, my younger son had always been different, quieter, more introspective, but Emily had never tried to understand him. Your Uncle Brian has his own life to manage, I said carefully. That doesn't mean he doesn't care about us. I know. I like when he comes over. He actually asks me about school. The unspoken comparison hung in the air. David, her father, barely looked up from his phone during most conversations with Olivia. I watched my granddaughter arrange the silverware with careful precision, the same way I'd taught her when she was 8. Grandma Maggie, can I ask you something? Always. Why do you cook dinner every night when Dad gets takeout anyway? The question hit deeper than she could have known. Well, someone should make sure there's a proper meal available, and I enjoy cooking. But you eat alone most nights. I paused, holding a serving spoon midair. Not when you're here with me. That's only weekends. David walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie. Mom, we're going to be late tonight. Can you just order pizza for Olivia? I've already prepared dinner, I said, gesturing to the pot roast that had been cooking for 3 hours. Great. We'll take it for lunch tomorrow. Pizza's easier. He was already reaching for his wallet when Emily appeared behind him, dressed in a black cocktail dress I'd helped her pick out last month. David, we need to leave in 10 minutes. Margaret, the sitter, money is on the counter. Sitter money. I felt something cold settle in my chest. For watching Olivia. We don't expect you to do it for free. I stared at the $20 bill on the granite countertop next to the keys to the house I'd helped them buy, in the kitchen I'd designed and partly paid for when David's business was struggling 5 years ago. Emily, I don't need payment for spending time with my granddaughter. Everyone should be compensated for their work, she said, checking her reflection in the black surface of the refrigerator. It's more professional this way. Professional. As if loving my own family required a business transaction. Mom's not our employee, David said quietly, but he didn't look at me when he said it. Of course not. Emily's voice softened in that way it did when other people were listening. I just want to make sure Margaret knows how much we appreciate everything. She does. The house, the dinners, the babysitting, it's a lot. It's not babysitting when it's your grandmother, Olivia said from the dining room. Emily's smile tightened. Olivia, go get your backpack ready for school tomorrow. But now. I watched my granddaughter leave, her shoulders slumped, in that defeated way that reminded me too much of myself lately. When had I started walking through this house like I was apologizing for existing in it? We really do appreciate everything, Mom, David said, finally meeting my eyes. You know that, right? I wanted to ask when appreciation had started looking like $20 bills and takeout orders. I wanted to ask when my son had stopped calling me by my name and started managing me like a household service. Instead, I nodded. Have a good time tonight. They left in a rush of expensive perfume and car doors slamming. I stood in the kitchen looking at the pot roast that would feed 4 people, knowing I'd be eating it alone for the next 3 days. The phone rang. Margaret, it's Lisa. How are you holding up? My oldest friend had a way of calling at exactly the right moments, as if she could sense when the walls of this big house felt like they were closing in. I'm fine, I said automatically. That's what you always say. What are you doing tonight? David and Emily went to another gala. I'm watching Olivia. Again, Margaret. When was the last time you did something for yourself? I couldn't remember. The question sat in my throat like something I'd swallowed wrong. When had my entire life become about making everyone else's life easier? I like spending time with Olivia. I know you do, but that's not what I'm asking. Lisa had known me for 43 years. She'd been my maid of honor, had held my hand when my husband died, had listened to me worry about David's marriage, Brian's distance, and my own growing sense that I was disappearing inside my own life. I should go check on Olivia, I said. Margaret. Yes? You matter too. After I hung up, I stood in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the house settle around me. Upstairs, I could hear Olivia's music playing softly. The pot roast sat cooling on the stove. The $20 bill remained on the counter, somehow more insulting than if they'd left nothing at all. I thought about my husband, Robert, and how he used to say I had the biggest heart of anyone he'd ever known. Sometimes I worry people will take advantage of that, he'd told me once near the end. Promise me you won't let them forget who you are. I'd promised, but sitting in that kitchen I realized I was the one who'd forgotten. Did you hear about the Peterson account? Tom's voice was barely above a whisper as he leaned across my desk at the family company offices. I looked up from the quarterly reports I'd been reviewing, a habit I'd maintained since Robert's death, even though no one asked for my input anymore. What about it? Emily closed it last week, didn't mention it in the board summary. Tom had worked for our company since David was in high school. He'd started as an intern and worked his way up to operations manager, which meant he saw everything that moved through the business. More importantly, he remembered when I used to attend every board meeting, when my signature was required for major decisions. Maybe it wasn't significant enough to mention, I said, though something in his expression told me otherwise. Margaret, the Peterson account was worth $200,000 a year. It's the 3rd major client we've lost in 6 months. I set down my pen. 3 clients? You didn't know? Tom glanced toward Emily's office, where I could see her through the glass partition, speaking animatedly on the phone. She's been restructuring the client base. Says she's streamlining operations for efficiency. The phrase sounded like Emily, business school terminology that meant very little in practical terms. But losing clients meant losing revenue, and losing revenue meant... Tom, can you pull the financial summaries for the last year? I'd like to review them. I tried to access them last week for the monthly reports. Emily's moved everything to a new system. Says it's more secure. More secure from whom? He didn't answer directly, but his meaningful look told me everything I needed to know. That evening I sat in my bedroom, the same room I'd shared with Robert for 38 years, and tried to piece together the conversations I'd been excluded from lately. Phone calls that ended when I entered a room. Documents Emily quickly closed when I walked past. Her desk. David's distracted responses when I asked about business decisions. Mrs. Walker? The voice belonged to Mrs. Green from next door, calling over the fence between our gardens. Do you have a minute? I found her in her backyard, pruning roses with the focused attention of someone who'd been tending the same garden for 20 years. I hope you don't mind my asking, she said, not looking up from her work. But is everything all right with your family? What do you mean? I heard raised voices yesterday evening, through the windows. It sounded tense. I tried to remember yesterday evening. David had come home early, which was unusual. Emily had been in the study with papers spread, across Robert's old desk. I'd heard their voices but hadn't paid attention to the words. Family businesses can be stressful, I said carefully. Mrs. Green nodded, snipping a dead bloom. My late husband always said the hardest part about working with family was knowing when someone was taking advantage of your trust. The words settled over me like a chill. What did you hear exactly? I couldn't make out specifics, but your daughter-in-law mentioned something about moving forward and making necessary changes. Your son didn't sound happy about it. I thanked Mrs. Green and walked back to the house, her words echoing in my mind. In the study, Emily's papers were gone, but Robert's desk looked different somehow. Cleaner, more organized, as if someone had been removing things rather than adding them. The next morning I arrived at the office earlier than usual. Emily's assistant, Janet, looked surprised to see me. Mrs. Walker, did you have an appointment scheduled? I don't need an appointment to visit my own company, I said, though I softened it with a smile. Janet had always been kind to me, even when others seemed to forget I existed. Of course not. Emily's in meetings all morning, but you're welcome to wait in the conference room. I thanked her and walked toward my old office, the one I'd used when Robert was alive, when we ran this company together. The nameplate on the door now read, Storage, and when I tried the handle, it was locked. Looking for something? Emily's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her standing in the hallway, wearing one of those sharp blazers that made her look like she belonged in a corporate boardroom rather than a family business that had started in our garage 30 years ago. I was hoping to review some of the old client files, I said, for context on the quarterly reports. Which reports? The ones Tom mentioned about the client changes. Emily's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. Margaret, I appreciate your interest in staying involved, but the day-to-day operations are really David's and my responsibility now. You've done so much already. You deserve to enjoy your retirement. Retirement? When had anyone mentioned retirement? I'm not ready to retire, Emily. This company is still partly mine. Of course it is. And that's exactly why David and I work so hard to protect it. We handle the stressful part so you don't have to worry about them. But I wanted to worry about them. I wanted to know why clients were leaving, why financial documents were locked away, why my own daughter-in-law was speaking to me like I was a well-meaning volunteer rather than a founding member of this business. I'd still like to see the reports, I said. I'll have Janet prepare a summary for you. The full reports are quite technical. Lots of spreadsheets and industry jargon. I think you'd find them boring. As I walked back to my car, I realized Emily had never actually said yes to my request. She'd managed to make me feel foolish for asking while promising something that would likely never arrive. That night, David called during dinner. "Mom, Emily mentioned you stopped by the office today. I wanted to review some documents as a board member." "Right. The thing is, we're in the middle of some transitions right now. It might be better if you gave us some space to handle things. We don't want to overwhelm you with all the details." Overwhelm me? As if I hadn't spent 30 years learning every detail of this business. As if I hadn't worked 16-hour days when David was in college and the company was struggling to survive. David, I'm not some fragile elderly woman who can't handle business decisions. I helped build this company. I know, Mom, and we're grateful. But things are more complicated now than when you and Dad were running things. The market is different. The regulations are different. Emily has the MBA training to handle the current challenges. And I have 30 years of experience. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. "Mom, we just want what's best for everyone, including you." After he hung up, I sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten dinner alone, again looking at the quarterly reports I'd brought home from the office. Numbers that used to tell clear stories now seemed to hide more than they revealed. Revenue streams that had shifted without explanation. Expenses that appeared and disappeared between months. I thought about Mrs. Green's words, about Tom's concerned expression, about Emily's smooth deflections, and David's careful distance. Separately, these things might have meant nothing. Together, they formed a pattern I was finally beginning to see. The question was whether I had the courage to keep looking. "Margaret, we need to talk." Emily's voice carried across the dining room with an authority that made every guest at our monthly family dinner look up from their plates. I'd spent the afternoon preparing Robert's favorite meal: herb-crusted salmon, roasted vegetables, homemade dinner rolls, for our extended family gathering. Brian had actually come, bringing his girlfriend Sarah for the first time. Tom and his wife were there, along with 2 other couples from the company. Even Mrs. Green had joined us, looking elegant in her navy dress. "Can it wait until after dinner?" I asked, noticing how the conversation had suddenly stopped around the table. "Actually, no. This affects everyone here." Emily stood up, smoothing her black dress. "Since we're all together, it seems like the perfect time to address some concerns." David shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Emily, maybe we should—" "David, we discussed this." Her voice was sharp enough to silence him. "Margaret, I'm going to be direct, because I respect you too much to talk behind your back." The words felt like a setup, the kind of statement that preceded something devastating. I set down my fork and waited. "Several people have brought concerns to my attention about your increasing involvement in family matters that might be better handled by others." "What kind of involvement?" Brian asked, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. Emily turned to face the table like she was giving a presentation. "Margaret has been questioning business decisions, requesting access to confidential documents, and frankly, undermining the authority David and I need to run the company effectively. That's not—" I started. Yesterday, she demanded to see client files that contained sensitive information. Last week, she interrogated Tom about financial matters that are frankly above her current level of understanding. I felt heat rise in my cheeks. I didn't interrogate anyone. I asked questions about my own company. Your company? Emily's voice rose slightly. Margaret, you haven't been actively involved in business operations for 5 years. The company has evolved far beyond what you and Robert built. We appreciate your contributions, but continuing to interfere with daily operations is becoming problematic. Interfere? The word came out louder than I'd intended. I founded this company with my husband. I've supported it through every crisis, every expansion, And that's exactly why this is so difficult, Emily interrupted, her voice softening into what I recognized as her public sympathy tone. You've given so much to this family, to this business, but sometimes caring too much can become controlling. The word hung in the air like smoke. Around the table I saw faces, turning away, conversations dying, forks being set down with careful precision. I'm not controlling, I said quietly. Margaret, you show up at the office unannounced. You question every decision David and I make. You insert yourself into conversations about business strategy, financial planning, even personnel decisions. Yesterday, you actually suggested we were making mistakes with client relationships. Because you are making mistakes. We've lost 3 major clients in 6 months. See? Emily gestured toward me as if I'd just proven her point. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You assume that because something worked 30 years ago. It's not about 30 years ago, I said, standing up. It's about basic business principles that don't change just because you have an MBA. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah reached for Brian's hand under the table. Tom stared at his plate. Mrs. Green looked like she wanted to disappear. Emily sighed, the sound carrying years of supposed patience. Margaret, I know this is hard to hear, but your constant questioning of our decisions isn't just affecting the business, it's affecting this family. David comes home stressed because he feels like he can't make any choice without your approval. Olivia is picking up on the tension. Even tonight at what should be a pleasant family dinner, you've managed to create conflict. I haven't created anything, I said, my voice shaking. I asked legitimate questions about a business I helped build. This is what I mean, Emily said, turning to address the table. Everything becomes an argument. Every suggestion becomes a challenge to her authority. It's exhausting for everyone. I looked around the table searching for support, for someone to speak up, to point out that Emily was the one who had turned a private conversation into a public humiliation. But David was staring at his hands. Brian looked confused and uncomfortable. The company guests seemed desperate to be anywhere else. Maybe, Emily continued, it would be better for everyone if you took some time to focus on yourself. Travel, pursue hobbies, enjoy your retirement. Let David and me handle the business without constantly worrying about whether we're meeting your approval. You want me to disappear, I said. I want you to trust us. But if you can't do that, then yes, perhaps some distance would be healthier for everyone involved. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. The same clock that had measured the rhythm of this house for 30 years. You know what? I said, reaching for my purse. You're right. This dinner was a mistake. Margaret, don't be dramatic, Emily said. Sit down. Let's finish our meal and discuss this like adults. But I was already walking toward the front. door? My face burning with embarrassment and something else. Something that felt like rage mixed with clarity. "Where are you going?" David finally spoke. I turned back to face the dining room full of people who had watched me be humiliated. Without saying a word, "I'm going to stay with Lisa for a few days. Clearly, my presence here is problematic." "Mom, that's not David." Emily's voice was firm. "Let her go. Sometimes people need space to process their emotions." I grabbed my coat from the hall. Closet. The same closet where I'd hung Robert's jackets for years after his death, unable to let go of the smell of his cologne on the fabric. Behind me, I heard Emily's voice, bright and social again. "I'm sorry everyone had to witness that. Margaret's been under a lot of stress lately." I opened the front door to rain, cold and sudden. As I reached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. "Grandma Maggie, wait." Olivia's voice was small and urgent. I turned to find her standing in the doorway in her good dress, looking younger than her 12 years. "Don't go," she said. "Olivia, get back inside," David called from behind her. "Dad, why didn't you say anything? Why did you let Mom talk? To Grandma like that?" "Olivia now." She looked at me with an expression that broke my heart. Confusion, betrayal, and something that looked like disappointment in her father. "I'll call you tomorrow, sweetheart," I said. As I drove away, I could see Emily in the dining room window, her arm around David's shoulders, probably explaining to the guests how difficult it was to manage aging family members who couldn't accept. Changing roles. But for the first time in months, I felt something other than hurt. I felt angry. And underneath the anger, like a seed that had been waiting for the right conditions to grow, I felt the beginning of determination. Emily had made one crucial mistake in her public humiliation. She'd assumed I would disappear quietly, that I would accept her version of events and retreat into the retirement she'd mapped out for me. She was wrong. "Margaret Walker, what in the world happened to you?" Lisa opened her front door in her bathrobe, took one look at my face, and pulled me inside without waiting for an answer. Her house smelled like jasmine tea and the vanilla candles she burned every evening while reading. After the sterile perfection of David's house, Lisa's comfortable chaos felt like coming home. "Let me make you some tea," she said, guiding me to her kitchen table. "Then you can tell me why you're standing on my doorstep at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, looking like someone died." I hadn't realized I was crying until she handed me a box of tissues. "Emily humiliated me," I said. "In front of everyone, at my own dinner table." Lisa sat down across from me, her gray hair messy from sleep, her face serious. "Tell me everything." So I did. Every word, every silence, every face that had turned away when I needed someone to speak up for me. Lisa listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or anger. "That woman," she said when I finished, "is a piece of work." Maybe she's right, though. Maybe I have been interfering. "Margaret Ellen Walker, don't you dare!" Lisa's voice was sharp enough to make me look up. "I've known you for 43 years. You're not controlling or interfering. You're thorough, you're careful, and you notice things other people miss. That's not a character flaw. That's a strength. Then why does everyone act like I'm some meddling old woman who can't accept that times have changed? Because it's easier than admitting they've been taking advantage of you." The words hit like cold water. "What do you mean?" Lisa got up to refill her tea mug, moving with the careful precision of someone organizing her thoughts. "Margaret, you've been supporting that family, financially and emotionally, for 5 years. You helped them buy that house. You pay for Olivia's school expenses, you provide free childcare, you cook their meals, and you've never asked for anything in return. They're my family, and you're theirs. But when was the last time David called to ask how you were doing? When was the last time Emily thanked you for anything? When was the last time anyone in that house treated you like a person instead of a service? I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. The examples wouldn't come. You know what I think? Lisa continued. I think Emily realizes you're catching on to something, and she's trying to push you out before you figure out what it is. Catching on to what? I don't know yet, but those questions you've been asking about the business, they're good questions, and the fact that she won't answer them tells me you're asking the right ones. Lisa made up the guest room while I called Brian to explain where I was. He answered on the second ring, his voice tight with frustration. Mom, I can't believe what happened tonight. You were there. You saw it all. I saw Emily turn a family, dinner into a boardroom coup, and I saw Dad sit there and let it happen. Brian had always been the family truth-teller, even as a child. While David tried to please everyone, Brian pointed out inconvenient realities that others preferred to ignore. She made some valid points, I said, though the words felt wrong in my mouth. She made calculated attacks designed to embarrass you into submission. There's a difference. Brian. Mom, I've been watching this for months. The way she talks to you, the way she dismisses your opinions, the way she's slowly pushing you out of your own company. Tonight was just the first time she did it publicly. What do you mean, pushing me out? Have you seen the new corporate documents she filed last month? The ones that restructured the board voting procedures? I hadn't seen any new corporate documents. What documents? I'll bring them over tomorrow. Mom, I think you need to understand exactly what's been happening while you've been trying to keep the peace. After I hung up, I sat in Lisa's guest room surrounded by familiar comfort. Handmade quilts, photographs of our children growing up together, books we'd shared and discussed over coffee. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Lisa knocked on the door. Can I come in? She settled into the reading chair by the window, curling her legs under her like she'd done when we were young mothers, comparing notes about sleepless nights and endless laundry. I want you to do something for me, she said. I want you to make a list. What kind of list? Everything you've contributed to that family over the past 5 years. Money, time, support, connections, everything. Don't edit yourself. Don't minimize anything. Just write it all down. Lisa, I don't want to keep score. This isn't about keeping score. It's about recognizing your own value. You've been thinking about what you owe them for so long that you've forgotten what they owe you. She brought me a legal pad and a pen, then left me alone with my thoughts. I started with the obvious things. The down payment for their house, Olivia's private school tuition, the weekly dinners I prepared and mostly ate alone. But as I wrote, other things surfaced. The business connections I'd maintained after Robert's death, relationships that had brought the company 3 major contracts. In the past 2 years, the crisis management I'd handled when David was overwhelmed, the workers' compensation claim, the supplier dispute, the insurance audit that could have shut them down, the financial analysis I'd done when they were considering the office expansion, analysis that had saved them from a lease that would have bankrupted them within 18 months. The clients I'd personally convinced to stay when they were frustrated with service delays. By midnight, I had filled 4 pages with contributions I'd made but had never thought to mention, strengths I'd used but had never claimed credit for, knowledge I'd shared but had never been thanked for providing. Margaret? Lisa appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of hot chocolate. "How's the list coming?" I looked down at the pages covered with my handwriting. Documentation of 5 years of invisible work. I had no idea. Now you're starting to see what I see. What everyone else sees, except the people who benefit from your work. She sat on the edge of the bed, reading over my shoulder. "Margaret, do you realize you're probably the most connected person in your industry? These client relationships, these business contacts, that's not something Emily can replicate with an MBA. I've never thought of it that way. Because you think of it as just being helpful. But from a business perspective, you're irreplaceable. And I think Emily knows that." I set down the pen and looked at my friend, this woman who had seen me through marriage, motherhood, widowhood, and now this strange new chapter of my life. What do I do now? Now you remember who you are, and then you decide whether you're going to let them keep treating you like you're not. "Mrs. Walker, I wasn't expecting you today." Janet looked up from her computer as I entered the office, carrying the key I'd found in Robert's desk drawer, the one I'd forgotten about until Brian mentioned the locked filing cabinets. "I need to collect some personal items from storage," I said, holding up the key. "Files that belonged to my husband." It wasn't entirely a lie. The storage room had been my office once, and Robert's files were technically personal in the sense that he was dead, and I was his widow. "Of course, Emily's in meetings until 3, so you'll have plenty of time." The lock turned easily, and I stepped into what had been my workspace for 15 years. Now it held obsolete computer equipment, old promotional materials, and several filing cabinets I recognized from Robert's home office. The first cabinet contained exactly what I expected: insurance policies, tax returns, personal correspondence. But the second cabinet, the one with the scratched lock that looked like it had been forced, held something else entirely: financial records. Not the sanitized quarterly reports I'd been shown, but detailed monthly statements going back 2 years, client contracts with handwritten notes in margins, email printouts paper-clipped to invoices that didn't match the amounts in the official books. "Looking for something specific?" I turned to find Tom standing in the doorway, a concerned expression on his face. "Just collecting Robert's things," I said. Though I didn't close the filing cabinet, Tom stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "Margaret, can I ask you something? Are you and Emily having some kind of disagreement about the business?" "Why?" "Because yesterday she asked me to change the locks on all the filing cabinets and install new password protection on the financial software. She said it was for security reasons, but she specifically mentioned making sure unauthorized personnel couldn't access sensitive information. I've been here 12 years, Margaret. You're not unauthorized personnel." I looked down at the papers in my hands. Client contracts that showed payments received but not recorded in the official books. "Tom, these numbers don't match the quarterly reports." He moved closer, looking over my shoulder. "Which numbers?" "The Morrison Group contract. According to this, they paid their full annual fee in January, but the quarterly report shows them as 60 days overdue." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Margaret, I think there are some things you should know, but not here." "Where?" "My house, tonight. Can you be there around 7? That evening, I sat in Tom's living room while his wife made coffee and tried not to listen to our conversation. Tom spread papers across the coffee table like a detective presenting evidence. "This started about 18 months ago," he said. "Small things at first. Clients who said they'd paid invoices that our system showed as Outstanding. Billing. Errors happen. That's what I thought. But then I noticed payments being deposited and immediately transferred to accounts I couldn't track. When I asked Emily about it, she said David had authorized the transfers for tax purposes. Did you ask David? I tried, but Emily said he was too busy with strategic planning to handle operational questions. She said all financial queries should go through her. Tom pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. Margaret, I've been keeping copies of everything that seemed unusual. Look at this. The Patterson Industries contract showed a payment of $50,000 received in March, but in the official books, Patterson was listed as inactive, with their final payment recorded as $15,000 in February. Where did the other $35,000 go? That's what I can't figure out. The money comes in, gets recorded briefly, then disappears into transfers that aren't explained in any documents I can access. I felt cold, even though Tom's house was warm. How much money are we talking about? Based on what I can document, probably close to $200,000 over the past year. But there might be more in accounts I don't have access to. $200,000. Enough to explain why Emily was so interested in limiting my access to financial information. Enough to explain why she needed me to step away from the business before I noticed the patterns Tom had been tracking. Tom, why didn't you say something sooner? To whom? David trusts Emily completely. The board meetings have become rubber stamp sessions, where Emily presents summaries and everyone approves them without reading the details. And honestly, I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. What do you mean? Emily has been very careful to position herself as the financial expert, while suggesting that anyone who questions her methods simply doesn't understand modern business practices. It's a clever strategy. Make people feel stupid for asking questions. I thought about the dinner party where Emily had lectured me about technical reports being too complicated for me to understand. About David telling me the business was more sophisticated than when Robert and I had run it. About feeling increasingly stupid for asking what seemed like basic questions. She's been gaslighting all of us, I said. Tom nodded. And it's been working. Until now. What changed? You started asking the right questions, and Emily overplayed her hand by trying to shut you down so publicly. If she'd been smarter, she would have kept making you feel incompetent while continuing to steal. The word hung in the air between us, stealing, because that's what this was. Not creative accounting or modern business practices, but theft. Tom, I need you to help me gather everything we can document. Every discrepancy, every transfer, every client payment that doesn't match the official records. Are you sure? This could get messy. Emily won't go down without a fight. I thought about the humiliation at my own dinner table, about 5 years of being made to feel like I was losing my mind, about my granddaughter watching her father stay silent while her mother destroyed his mother's dignity. I'm sure. But we have to be careful. Emily's smart, and she's had 18 months to cover her tracks. Tom's wife brought coffee and quietly retreated, but not before squeezing my shoulder in a gesture of support that made my throat tight. Margaret, there's something else you should know. Emily's been telling people you're having memory problems. What? She mentioned to several clients that you've been confused lately, forgetting conversations, repeating yourself. She suggested it might be early dementia. The room tilted slightly. She said that. She positioned it as concern for your well-being, said the family was worried about you but didn't want to hurt your feelings by addressing it directly. Now I understood why people had been looking at me with that careful pity lately. Why conversations seemed to pause when I entered rooms. Why my opinions were dismissed with gentle patience rather than argument. Emily hadn't just been stealing money. She'd been stealing my reputation, my credibility, my voice. She'd been systematically destroying my standing in the community while positioning herself as the caring daughter-in-law, managing a difficult situation. Tom, I need those documents, all of them, and I need you to help me understand the legal implications of what we're looking at. I'm not a lawyer, Margaret. No, but you understand the business, and right now, I need someone who can help me separate what Emily has done from what she's made people think I've done. As I drove back to Lisa's house that night, I realized Emily had made a crucial miscalculation. She'd been so focused on discrediting me that she'd forgotten I still had legal standing in the company. And she'd been so confident in her ability to manipulate situations that she'd left a paper trail someone careful enough could follow. The question was whether I had the strength to follow it all the way to the end. Margaret, you need to see a lawyer. Brian spread the corporate documents across Lisa's kitchen table, his face grim. These aren't just procedural changes. They're designed to remove your voting power without technically removing your shares. I studied the papers, recognizing the company letterhead, but not understanding the legal language that filled page after page. Explain it to me like I'm 12. Emily restructured the board so that operational decisions require a 2/3 majority of active board members. Then she redefined active to exclude anyone not involved in daily business operations. Which means your 40% ownership still exists on paper, but your vote doesn't count for anything that matters. She's essentially made you a silent partner in your own company. Lisa leaned over my shoulder, reading the documents. When was this filed? 3 weeks ago, right after Mom started asking questions about the financial reports. The timing wasn't coincidental. Emily had been preparing for my resistance before I'd even recognized I was being pushed out. Brian, who signed these documents? David and Emily, as primary operational officers, and apparently you did too. I never signed anything like this. Brian pointed to the signature page. There, in handwriting that looked remarkably like mine, was my name next to a notary seal, dated 2 weeks ago. I was never in front of a notary 2 weeks ago, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Then we have bigger problems than I thought, Brian said. Because this is fraud. That afternoon I sat in the office of Harold Harris, the lawyer who had handled Robert's estate and our family's legal needs for 20 years. He read through Brian's documents with the careful attention of someone who had seen every possible way families could destroy themselves over money. Mrs. Walker, when did you first suspect there were irregularities in the company's financial management? About 2 weeks ago, when I started asking questions that no one wanted to answer. I handed him the folder Tom had prepared. Copies of client contracts, payment records, transfer documents, and the email communications that showed Emily's increasing control over all financial information. Harold studied the papers for a long time, occasionally making notes in the margins. This is quite thorough. Who compiled this? Tom Evans, our operations manager. He's been tracking discrepancies for months. And you believe Mrs. Emily Walker has been misappropriating company funds? I believe she's been moving money in ways that don't match our official records. And she's been very careful to prevent anyone from reviewing her work. Harold set down the papers and looked at me directly. Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you prepared for what happens if we pursue this? What do you mean? If we file complaints about financial irregularities, if we challenge these corporate restructuring documents, if we demand a full audit of company finances, it's going to tear your family apart. David will have to choose between his wife and his mother. Your granddaughter will be caught in the middle. Your son, Brian, will be forced to take sides publicly. I sat in the leather chair where I'd signed my will, where I'd handled Robert's estate, where I'd made all the legal decisions of my adult life. Through the window, I could see the courthouse where I'd served jury duty, voted in every election, participated in the civic life of a community where I'd lived for 40 years. Harold, what happens if I don't pursue this? Emily continues to control the company while systematically removing your influence. The financial irregularities continue until either the business fails or she finds a way to remove you entirely, and you spend the rest of your life wondering if you had the courage to stand up for yourself when it mattered. And my family is already torn apart, Margaret. You're just deciding whether to acknowledge it or pretend everything is fine, while Emily destroys what you and Robert built. That evening, I called David. He answered on the third ring, his voice cautious. "Mom, how are you doing?" "I need to talk to you about the company." "Can it wait? Emily and I are in the middle of something important." "David, I've discovered some financial discrepancies that need to be addressed immediately." The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. "What kind of discrepancies?" "Client payments that don't match our official records, money transfers that aren't documented properly, and corporate documents that were apparently signed in my name, without my knowledge." "Mom, are you sure you're not misunderstanding something? Emily handles all the complex financial management now. Maybe you're looking at interim reports or draft documents." "David, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm scheduling an emergency board meeting for Friday morning. As a 40% shareholder, that's my right. You can't just call board meetings whenever you want to create drama." "I'm not creating drama. I'm exercising my legal rights as a company owner. Emily seems to have forgotten that this business doesn't belong to her." Another long silence. Then, "What exactly are you accusing Emily of?" "I'm not accusing anyone of anything yet. I'm requesting a full financial audit and a review of all corporate decisions made in the past 18 months. Mom, this is going to be very embarrassing for you when the audit shows everything is perfectly legitimate." "Then we have nothing to worry about, do we?" After I hung up, I realized my hands were shaking, not from fear or uncertainty, but from something I hadn't felt in years, the excitement of taking action instead of accepting whatever other people decided was best for me. Lisa found me in the kitchen staring at the phone. "How did it go?" "David thinks I'm making a mistake. He's probably calling Emily right now to warn her." "Good. Let them scramble. Let them worry about what you know and what you're planning to do about it." "Lisa, what if I'm wrong? What if Emily really is just a better businesswoman than I am? And I'm about to humiliate myself publicly." Lisa sat down across from me, her expression serious. "Margaret, I've known you for 43 years. You're many things. Generous to a fault, too trusting sometimes, willing to sacrifice your own needs for others. But you're not stupid, and you're not crazy. If you think something is wrong, something is wrong." "How can you be so sure?" "Because the alternative is that a woman who built a successful business with her husband, who raised 2 sons, who managed family finances for 30 years, suddenly became incompetent the moment someone with an MBA showed up. That's not how competence works." I looked at my friend. This woman who had believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Friday morning could be a disaster. Friday morning could be the day you take your life back. Margaret, this is ridiculous. Emily's voice carried across the conference room as I arranged my documents on the table. You're embarrassing yourself and wasting everyone's time. The board meeting I'd called had drawn a larger crowd than expected. Besides the required board members, myself, David, Emily, and 2 outside directors, Tom was there as operations, manager, Harold as legal counsel, and even Brian, who had driven down from the city that morning. Emily, you'll have your chance to address my concerns, I said, settling into the chair at the head of the table, Robert's old spot that I hadn't occupied in 5 years. But first, I'd like to present some information to the board. David looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept. Emily looked calm and prepared, with her own stack of documents and a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. Before we begin, Emily said, I think the board should know that Margaret has been under significant stress lately. Her accusations are based on misunderstandings of documents she's not qualified to interpret. One of the outside directors, James Morton, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Walker, perhaps we should discuss your concerns privately, rather than in a formal meeting. No, I said firmly. These concerns affect the entire company, and the board has a right to know about potential financial irregularities. Financial irregularities? The other outside director, Susan Chen, sat up straighter. What kind of irregularities? I opened my folder and began distributing copies of the documents Tom had helped me organize. Over the past 18 months, this company has received approximately $200,000 in client payments that don't appear in our official financial records. Emily laughed, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Margaret, those are interim payments that were reclassified for tax purposes. This is exactly what I mean about misunderstanding complex financial procedures. Then you won't mind explaining where the money went? Of course not. David, can you help your mother understand how modern business accounting works? But David was studying the documents I distributed, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Emily, this Patterson payment, where was it reclassified? To? The Strategic Development Fund we established for the expansion project. What expansion project? I asked. Emily's smile tightened slightly. The one we've been discussing for months, Margaret. Perhaps you've forgotten. I haven't forgotten anything. And I want to see documentation for this Strategic Development Fund. Margaret, Emily said, her voice taking on that patient tone I'd learned to hate. You're not currently involved in operational planning. These are complex business decisions that require... I'm 40% owner of this company, I interrupted. I have every right to understand how my money is being used. Your money? Emily's facade cracked slightly. Margaret, this is what I mean about your confusion. This isn't your personal bank account. It's a business with fiduciary responsibilities and tax obligations that require sophisticated financial management. Brian leaned forward. Emily, can you show us the documentation for this Strategic Development Fund? Brian, with all due respect, you're not even employed by this company. This meeting is between board members. Actually, Harold spoke for the first time. Mr. Walker is here as Mrs. Walker's representative, which is her right as a shareholder. Emily's composed expression slipped further. Fine. David, can you explain to your family why we can't simply hand over confidential financial documents every time someone has questions? David looked between his wife and his mother, clearly torn. Maybe we could provide some general information about the fund structure without compromising proprietary details." "What proprietary details?" I asked. "Emily, either this fund exists and you can document it, or it doesn't exist and you've been misappropriating company money." The room went silent. Emily stared at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not condescension or manufactured. Patience, but genuine anger. "Margaret, I've tried to handle this diplomatically, but your accusations are becoming slanderous. You're suggesting that I've committed crimes based on your inability to understand financial documents you haven't seen in 5 years. Then show me the documents that prove I'm wrong." "I don't have to prove anything to you. The burden of proof is on the person making accusations." Harold cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Emily Walker, as a board member and company officer, you do have a responsibility to provide documentation when legitimate questions are raised by shareholders." Emily turned to Harold with barely concealed hostility. "And who determines what constitutes a legitimate question? A confused elderly woman who thinks she's still running a company she hasn't been involved with for years." The words hit like a physical blow, but this time I didn't flinch. "Emily, I'm 67 years old, not 97, and I helped build this company from nothing. Don't mistake kindness for incompetence." "Kindness?" Emily stood up, her professional mask finally falling away. "Margaret, you've been interfering with business operations, questioning every decision David and I make, and now you're accusing me of embezzlement because you can't understand modern accounting practices." "I understand accounting perfectly. Well, what I don't understand is why you're so afraid to show me the documentation that would prove I'm wrong." Emily gathered her papers with sharp, angry movements. "David, I'm not going to sit here and be insulted by your mother's paranoid delusions. When you're ready to have a rational conversation about managing family members who can't accept changing roles, call me." She headed toward the door, then turned back. "And Margaret, if you continue making slanderous accusations about my integrity, you'll be hearing from my attorney." After she left, the room remained silent for a long moment. David sat with his head in his hands. The outside directors looked confused and uncomfortable. Brian was staring at the door Emily had slammed behind her. "Well," Susan Chen said finally. That was illuminating. David looked up. "I'm sorry everyone had to witness that. Emily's been under a lot of pressure lately." "David," I said gently, "your wife just refused to provide financial documentation to the board of directors. That's not pressure. That's suspicious. She's right to be upset. You basically accused her of stealing. I asked for documentation of financial transactions. If that sounds like an accusation of stealing to you, maybe you should ask yourself why." James Morton cleared his throat. "Mrs. Walker, what exactly are you requesting from the board?" "I'm requesting a full financial audit conducted by an independent accounting firm. I'm requesting copies of all corporate documents filed in the past 2 years, and I'm requesting that Emily Walker be suspended from financial management duties until the audit is complete." David's head snapped up. "You want to suspend my wife?" "I want to protect this company until we understand what's been happening with our finances. Mom, you're destroying my marriage." The pain in his voice was real, and it hurt to hear. But I thought about Olivia, about the business Robert and I had built, about 5 years of being made to feel crazy for asking reasonable questions. "David, I'm not destroying anything. I'm trying to save what we built before it's too late. The emergency board meeting will come to order." I sat at the head of the conference table, wearing the navy suit I'd bought for Robert's funeral, and hadn't worn since. The independent audit results sat in a manila folder in front of me. 3 weeks of investigation that had revealed exactly what Tom and I had suspected. Emily entered the room 10 minutes late, her lawyer beside her. David looked like he'd aged 5 years in the past month. Brian sat on my right, and Harold had positioned himself directly across from Emily's attorney. "Before we begin," Emily said, "I want it on record that this proceeding is unnecessary and vindictive. My client has done nothing wrong." "We'll see about that," I replied, opening the audit folder. "The board has received the independent financial audit we requested. I think everyone should hear what the auditors found." Susan Chen leaned forward. "Mrs. Walker, perhaps you could summarize the findings." I looked down at the pages of detailed financial analysis, then raised my eyes to meet Emily's stare. Over the past 18 months, Emily Walker diverted approximately $240,000 in client payments to personal accounts through a series of fraudulent transfers. Emily's lawyer immediately objected. "That's a serious accusation without—" "It's not an accusation," I interrupted. "It's a finding of fact by certified public accountants who spent 3 weeks reviewing every transaction. Emily, would you like to explain to the board how client payments made out to Walker Industries ended up in your personal checking account?" "Those were authorized expense reimbursements and consulting fees," Emily said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "Consulting fees for what?" "Business development activities that aren't documented in routine operational reports." Harold opened his own folder. "Mrs. Emily Walker, the auditors found no documentation for any consulting, agreements, expense reports, or board authorizations for these payments." Emily's lawyer whispered something in her ear. She shook her head slightly, then addressed the board. "The company benefited from my expertise and connections. Compensation was understood to be implicit in my role." "Compensation of $40,000 per month?" I asked. "That's more than we paid our operations manager, our accountant, and our office manager combined." David finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Emily, you told me those transfers were tax withholdings." The room went quiet. Emily stared at her husband, clearly unprepared for his public contradiction. "David, you're misremembering the conversation. We discussed various tax strategies." "No," David said, sitting up straighter. "You specifically told me the IRS required us to withhold estimated taxes on company profits. You said it was routine for businesses our size." "That may have been part of our discussions." "Emily, stop." David's voice was stronger now, carrying an authority I hadn't heard from him in years. "Just stop lying." Emily's composed facade finally cracked completely. "I worked for this company for 5 years without any official compensation, while Margaret treated me like hired help. I brought in clients. I modernized operations. I increased profits by 30%. I earned every dollar of that money." "By stealing it," Brian said quietly. "By taking what I deserved for building this business into something more than a mom-and-pop operation, run by people who couldn't adapt to changing markets." The contempt in her voice was unmistakable now. All pretense of respect or affection abandoned. "And the forged signature on the corporate restructuring documents?" Harold asked. "Was that also something you deserved?" Emily's lawyer put a hand on her arm, but she shook him off. "Margaret never read anything she signed anyway. I saved everyone time by handling the paperwork." "You committed fraud," I said simply. "You stole money, forged documents, and systematically lied to the board about company finances. I saved this company from irrelevance. When I started here, you were still using paper filing systems and accounting software from the 1990s. David was afraid to make any decision without asking his mommy for permission. Without me, this business would have died with Robert. The insult to my late husband's memory hit harder than her personal attacks on me. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. "Emily, you're fired," I said, my voice steady and calm. "Effective immediately. Your access to company accounts has been frozen, your corporate credit cards have been canceled, and security has been instructed to escort you from the building. You can't fire me. I'm a board member and David's wife." "You're a board member who committed fraud against the company. Under corporate law, that's grounds for immediate removal." Emily turned to David desperately. "Are you going to let her do this to me? To us?" David looked at his wife with an expression I couldn't read. Disappointment? Betrayal? Exhaustion? Maybe all three. "Emily, you lied to me for 18 months. You made me complicit in fraud. You made me choose between my wife and my mother by convincing me that Mom was having mental problems. David, you told our friends that my mother had dementia. You humiliated her at family dinners and made me watch without defending her. You stole from the company my parents built, and then blamed Mom for being suspicious." Emily's lawyer leaned over to whisper urgently in her ear, but she was focused entirely on David. "I did all of this for us, for our future. Your mother was holding this company back with her outdated methods and constant interference. My mother was asking legitimate questions about irregular financial transactions. She was doing her job as a board member." James Morton had been silent throughout the exchange, but now he spoke up. "Mrs. Emily Walker, the board votes to remove you from all positions within Walker Industries, effective immediately. The matter of criminal charges will be referred to the district attorney's office." Emily stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "Fine, but don't think this is over. I'll file for divorce and claim half of everything David owns, including his share of this company." "Emily," David said quietly, "I already filed for divorce, yesterday, and according to our prenuptial agreement, you're not entitled to any business assets." The look on Emily's face was pure shock. "What prenuptial agreement?" "The one you signed before our wedding. The one you said was just a formality." Emily's lawyer was frantically shuffling through papers, clearly unaware of this development. Emily herself looked stunned, as if she'd never considered that her own manipulative tactics might be used against her. "David, you can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting what's left of my family and my company from someone who's been systematically destroying both." As Emily and her lawyer left the conference room, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 5 years, the satisfaction of being heard, believed, and supported by the people who mattered. David turned to me, his eyes red with exhaustion and regret. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you." "You're listening now," I said. "That's what matters." Brian reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Dad would be proud too." As the board meeting concluded and people began to file out, I remained in my chair, looking around the conference room where Robert and I had made so many decisions together. Where we'd planned the company's growth and weathered its challenges. Emily had been wrong about one thing. This business hadn't died with Robert. It had been wounded, manipulated, and nearly destroyed, but it hadn't died. And now, maybe, it could heal. Grandma Maggie, are you really going to be the boss of Dad's company now? Olivia sat at my kitchen table, helping me sort through old photographs I'd brought back from the office. Your dad is still the president, I said, holding up a picture of Robert cutting the ribbon at our first office expansion. But yes, I'll be more involved in the big decisions. Good. Mom Emily was mean to you. I looked at my granddaughter, this wise 12-year-old who had watched our family drama unfold with the clear-eyed perception of someone too young to be fooled by adult justifications. Olivia, your parents' divorce isn't your fault. You know that, right? I know. Dad explained everything. He said Mom Emily did bad things with money and told lies about you. David had been careful about how much he told Olivia, but children see more than adults realize. She'd witnessed the tension, the arguments, the way Emily had spoken to me. Are you sad about the divorce? I asked. Olivia considered the question seriously. A little. But mostly I'm glad Dad finally stood up to her. She made him scared to make decisions. Out of the mouths of babes. And now you and Uncle Brian and Dad are all talking again, she continued. That's good. We felt broken for a while. Brian had moved back to town, taking over Emily's role as financial manager while we searched for a permanent replacement. He'd found an apartment near the office and had been joining us for dinner most nights. Real family dinners where we talked about our days and laughed at Olivia's stories about middle school drama. Mrs. Walker? Lisa appeared in my kitchen doorway, carrying a briefcase and wearing the professional clothes she'd bought for her new job as my assistant. The insurance adjuster is here for the final walkthrough. David and Olivia had moved in with me temporarily while they looked for a new house. Emily had taken their furniture and most of their belongings, leaving father and daughter with suitcases and a few personal items. But the house felt more alive than it had in years, filled with conversation and laughter and the comfortable chaos of a real family. Grandma, look at this one. Olivia held up a photograph of Robert and me at the company Christmas party, probably 15 years ago. We were laughing at something off camera, and his arm was around my waist. You look happy, she said. We were happy. Your grandfather loved Christmas parties. He always said they were his favorite part of running the business, seeing everyone celebrate together. Will we have Christmas parties again? Absolutely. In fact, we're planning one for next month. The whole company, plus families. Tom's already volunteered to handle the decorations. Tom had become my unofficial right-hand man, helping me understand the changes Emily had made to company operations and working with Brian to restore financial transparency. He'd also been instrumental in rebuilding relationships with the clients Emily had alienated with her aggressive management style. Margaret? David's voice came from the front hall. I'm home. Home. He'd started calling my house home 3 weeks ago, and each time he said it, something tight in my chest loosened a little more. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. How did the meeting with Patterson Industries go? They're coming back, I said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of my voice. Full contract, plus they're referring 2 other companies. David grinned. You always were better at client relationships than Emily gave you credit for. Your father used to say that people do business with people they trust. Emily was competent, but she never understood that competence without trust is just efficiency, without loyalty. Speaking of trust, Brian said, entering through the back door with grocery bags. Mrs. Chen called. The board unanimously approved your proposal for the employee profit-sharing program. The profit-sharing program had been my idea, a way to reward the employees who had stayed loyal to the company during Emily's reign, and to prevent future financial irregularities by giving everyone a stake in honest operations. "Uncle Brian, did you get ice cream?" Olivia asked hopefully. "Chocolate chip and strawberry, but only after you finish your homework." Brian had surprised everyone by how naturally he'd taken to being around Olivia. He'd never shown much interest in children before, but something about having family nearby again had awakened his protective instincts. That evening, after Olivia was in bed and David was reviewing contracts in the study, I found myself in the garden with Lisa, both of us holding cups of tea and watching the sunset. "Are you happy?" she asked. I considered the question. 3 months ago, I'd been eating dinner alone every night, questioning my own sanity, and watching my family slip away from me. Now I was running a company again, living with my son and granddaughter, and working alongside my other son every day. "I'm useful," I said finally. "For the first time in 5 years, I feel useful. That's not the same as happy. No, but it's the foundation for happiness. I forgot that for a while. That usefulness and purpose matter as much as love and acceptance." "Emily tried to make you believe you were useless. And I let her, because it was easier than fighting. I thought if I just kept being helpful and accommodating, eventually everyone would appreciate me. But appreciation isn't something you can earn by making yourself smaller." Lisa raised her teacup in a mock toast. "To getting bigger. To taking up the space we deserve." As we sat in comfortable silence, I thought about Robert and what he would make of the past few months. He'd always worried that people would take advantage of my generous nature, but I think he would have been proud of how I'd finally learned to distinguish between generosity and self-sacrifice. The company was thriving under restored leadership that valued both innovation and integrity. My relationship with David had deepened beyond the surface politeness that had characterized our interactions during Emily's reign. Brian had found his place in the family business and seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. And Olivia was learning that women could be strong without being cruel. That family meant protecting each other, not managing each other. And that sometimes the adults in your life will surprise you by growing up. Emily had been wrong about many things, but she'd been most wrong about this. She'd assumed that pushing me out would eliminate the threat I posed to her plans. Instead, it had forced me to remember who I was and what I was capable of when I stopped apologizing for my own existence. "Grandma Maggie, why are we planting a tree at your office?" Olivia knelt beside me in the company courtyard, her hands dirty from the rich soil we'd prepared for the young oak sapling. "Because your great-grandfather always said that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, and the second best time is today." She laughed. "That doesn't make sense." "It means we can't change the past, but we can still do something good for the future." Around us, the entire Walker Industries staff had gathered for our impromptu tree planting ceremony. Tom held a camera, documenting the moment for the company newsletter. Brian stood with Susan Chen and James Morton, discussing the quarterly projections that showed our best financial performance in 3 years. David was talking with 2 new clients who had sought us out specifically because of our reputation for ethical business practices. "Is this tree going to get really big?" Olivia asked, patting soil around the roots. "If we take care of it, it should live for over 100 years. Long enough for your children to climb in its branches someday. Will you be here to see my children?" The question caught me off guard with its innocent directness. At 67, I couldn't promise to see Olivia's children, but I could promise something else. I'll make sure this company is here for your children if they want to be part of it. And I'll make sure they know the story of how their great-great-grandmother helped build something worth inheriting. Lisa handed me the small plaque we'd had made for the tree dedication. It read, "In memory of Robert Walker, and in honor of new beginnings, may we grow with wisdom, strength, and integrity." "Would you like to do the honors?" I asked Olivia. She carefully positioned the plaque next to the tree, then stepped back to admire her work. "It looks official now." "It is official. You've just dedicated the Margaret and Robert Walker Memorial Oak." "It's named after you, too?" "It's named after us. Your great-grandfather and I built this company together, and now we're building it again. All of us, together." As the crowd began to disperse back to their afternoon work, David approached me with an expression I recognized from his childhood. The look he got when he wanted to say something important but wasn't sure how to begin. "Mom, I owe you an apology that's bigger than anything I can say in words." "David, no, let me finish. I let Emily convince me that your questions were interference, that your concerns were confusion, that your love was control. I watched her humiliate you and I said nothing. I chose her version of events over 30 years of knowing who you are. I looked at my son, this man who had carried the burden of betraying his mother while believing he was protecting his marriage. David, Emily was very skilled at making people doubt themselves. She convinced you just like she convinced me. But you figured it out. You fought back. I just accepted it. You were trying to hold your family together. That's not a character flaw. It is when it means sacrificing the parent who spent 30 years holding the family together. For me." Brian joined us, having finished his conversation with the board members. "Are we having a family therapy session in the courtyard?" "We're having a family conversation," I said, "about how we move forward from here." "I vote for family dinners every Sunday," Brian said. "Real ones, where we actually talk to each other." "And family meetings every month about the business," David added, "where everyone's opinion matters, including yours, Mom." "And family vacations," Olivia chimed in, appearing beside us with dirt-stained knees and a grin. "Grandma Maggie, you never take vacations." She was right. For 5 years, I'd been so focused on making myself useful and accommodating that I'd forgotten I was allowed to have wants and needs beyond serving others. "Where should we go?" I asked. "Disney World," Olivia said immediately. "The mountains," Brian suggested. "Somewhere we can hike and talk and turn off our phones." "Honestly," David said, "I don't care where we go as long as we go together." That evening I sat in Robert's study, my study now, reviewing the company's strategic plan for the next 5 years. We'd rebuilt our client base, restored our reputation, and established financial practices that prioritized transparency over efficiency. More importantly, we'd created a culture where questions were welcomed rather than discouraged, where experience was valued alongside innovation. Lisa knocked on the doorframe. "How's the empire building going?" "It doesn't feel like empire building," I said. "It feels like home building." "Same thing, really. You're creating something that will last, something that honors the people who believe in you." I set down my pen and looked at her. "Lisa, do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found that ledger? If I just accepted Emily's version of my life?" "You would have found another way," she said without hesitation. "Because the Margaret I know doesn't stay down. She might bend, but she doesn't break." I came very close to breaking. But you didn't. And now look at you. Running a company, raising a granddaughter, bringing a family back together. That's not the work of someone who was ever truly broken. Through the window, I could see the young oak tree we'd planted that afternoon, its small branches reaching toward the darkening sky. In 20 years, it would provide shade for future Walker Industries employees. In 50 years, it might shelter Olivia's children as they played in this same courtyard. Lisa, I want to ask you something. Anything. Would you consider becoming my business partner? Not just my assistant, my full partner in Walker Industries. Her cup paused halfway to her lips. Margaret, you've been by my side through everything. You helped me see my own worth when I'd forgotten it existed. You deserve to build something too, not just watch me build it. Are you sure? I've never been more sure of anything. Robert always said the strongest companies are built on partnerships, where both people bring different strengths to the table. You bring organization, perspective, and most importantly, you bring trust. I need someone I can trust completely. Lisa set down her tea and reached across to squeeze my hand. Then yes, absolutely yes. We sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear overhead. From inside the house, I could hear David helping Olivia with her math homework. Their voices mixing with the sound of Brian washing dishes in the kitchen. These were the sounds of a family that had learned to function again, to support each other instead of competing for space. Margaret? Olivia's voice called from the back door. Grandma, phone call for you. I went inside to find Olivia holding the cordless phone with a puzzled expression. It's Mom Emily, she whispered. She sounds weird. I took the phone, gesturing for Olivia to go help her uncle with the dishes. Hello, Emily. Margaret. Her voice was different, smaller somehow, stripped of its usual commanding tone. I wanted to talk to you. I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, about the things I said to you, the way I treated you. I waited, not making this easier for her. I was wrong, she continued, about a lot of things. I thought if I could just control everything, manage everyone, I could make our family perfect. But I ended up destroying it instead. Emily, why are you calling me now? Because David filed for divorce yesterday, and because Olivia refuses to speak to me unless I apologize to you first. She's 12 years old, and she has more integrity than I do. I felt a mix of sadness and vindication. Sadness because divorce, even a necessary one, creates wounds. Vindication because my granddaughter had chosen truth over convenience. What do you want from me, Emily? I want to know if there's any way, if we could find a way to coexist, for Olivia's sake. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm asking anyway. I looked toward the kitchen, where my granddaughter was drying dishes and chatting with her uncle, surrounded by the warmth of a family that had learned to value honesty over harmony. Emily, I don't hate you. I never did. But coexisting means respecting boundaries. It means accepting that Olivia will spend most of her time here, where she feels safe and valued. It means not trying to manipulate situations to get your way. I understand. And it means acknowledging that your attempt to erase me from this family's story failed. I'm not going anywhere. There was a long pause. I understand that too. Then we can coexist. But Emily, the version of you that tried to convince everyone I was confused and interfering, that version doesn't get access to my family anymore. If you want to be part of Olivia's life, you'll need to be the better version of yourself. I'll try. After I hung up, David appeared in the doorway. That sounded intense. It was necessary. Emily wants to maintain a relationship with Olivia. How do you feel about that? I considered the question. 3 months ago, I would have automatically said whatever I thought would make everyone else comfortable. Now I could give an honest answer. I feel like a grandmother who wants what's best for her granddaughter. If Emily can genuinely change, Olivia should have access to both her parents. If she can't change, well, Olivia is smart enough to figure that out on her own. David smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him since before Emily's deceptions, came to light. You know what I realized today, watching you with the tree planting and the employee meeting? What? You're exactly the same person you always were. Strong, thoughtful, generous. I just forgot how to see it. We all forgot a lot of things, but we're remembering now. The next morning, I woke to the sound of pancake batter being mixed in the kitchen and Olivia's laughter echoing through the house. These were the sounds of Sunday morning in a home where people actually wanted to be together. At the breakfast table, Brian announced that he'd found a house 3 blocks away. Close enough for Sunday dinners, he said. Far enough away that you can have your privacy back. What if I don't want my privacy back? I asked, surprising myself with the question. Then I'll stay as long as you'll have me, David said. Honestly, Mom, this feels more like home than anywhere I've lived in years. Even for me, Brian added. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of something larger than just myself. Olivia reached across the table to grab my hand. Grandma, Maggie, are you happy now? The question was simple, but the answer was complex. I was happy, but it was a different kind of happiness than I'd known before. It wasn't the happiness of someone who had gotten everything she wanted, but the happiness of someone who had learned to value what she deserved. Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy. Are you? I'm happy that adults finally started acting like adults, and I'm happy that you're not sad anymore. That afternoon, as we worked together in the garden, 3 generations of walkers plus Lisa, who had officially become family, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. Emily's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also been revealing. It had shown me that I could survive the loss of approval, that I could build something beautiful from the ashes of something broken, and that love without respect is just another form of control. The oak tree we'd planted would grow slowly, adding rings of strength year by year. Like the tree, I had learned that growth sometimes requires weathering storms, that the deepest roots develop in response to the strongest winds. As the sun set over our garden, I looked at my family, flawed, healing, but finally honest, and realized that dignity reclaimed isn't about getting revenge on those who wronged you. It's about remembering who you are when no one else is willing to see it, and then living that truth so completely that others have no choice but to recognize it too. The little girl who had been taught to be helpful above all else had grown into a woman who understood the difference between helping and enabling, between kindness and self-sacrifice, between loving someone and losing yourself in the process. Margaret Walker, widow, mother, grandmother, business leader, and woman who had learned to take up space, was finally home.